Hey there, everybody in the FFBE Global Facebook group, and hello to everybody who sees this video on YouTube as well. Welcome to this week's episode of Ask an Old Mog, where I take a look at some questions that I see in the global Facebook group and try and answer them in a visual format, usually with an emphasis on mechanics and rules of the game, kind of how to build and gear units, and kind of put teams together to help you work on trials and content. And this week we have a couple of questions that I was able to come up with and find that have to do with tanks. So I thought it might be useful to spend some time talking a little bit about tanks, as the current Clash of Wills is posing some threats to some of our tanking units. And some people have some questions about how tanking works in the game. So I thought it might be useful to talk about it. So the first question that kind of came up that I wanted to talk about was this. I decided to try and use both a physical tank and a magic tank in Cow. Even though I set it for physical and magic tanking, only my physical tank worked. Is there a rule about not being able to have both at the same time? My answer to this is yes, there are several rules about this. There is a really big important rule that we're going to talk about. And if you know where to look, you can find them, and that is the mechanics page of the wiki. If you've never been to the mechanics page, it is a very, very long document that has rules about everything about the game, how damage works, how tanking works, how chains are calculated. Like there's everything you might want to know about how the game works is on the mechanics page. And it can be a little bit of a lengthy, boring read. So I found some of the most important rules that I could find about cover tanking that I'm going to share with you now that specifically address this question. So here are the things that I feel like you should know about cover. Once a cover ability is triggered, that cover is going to stay active for the rest of your turn unless the coverer dies. Now, if that coverer that dies has re-raise, they cannot cover for the rest of the turn, asterisk, unless that unit has an auto cover ability. And most of our modern day tanks do have some sort of auto cover ability. So if they die and come back with re-raise, their cover ability kicks in and they start covering the party again right away once they come back to life. Now, here are some other rules about that though. A cover ability cannot trigger if the unit with that ability is being covered by another unit, regardless of the cover target or type. That means once an AoE cover is activated, no more cover abilities can be triggered for the rest of the turn. And so that kind of speaks to the issue that the question talks about. So in their question, they said, I brought a physical cover tank and a magical cover tank, and for some reason, the magical cover did not activate, only the physical cover did. And that makes sense when you think about these two rules. If the physical ability, triggered first, and the cover tank jumped in front of the magic cover tank, then that means that the magic cover tank never has a chance to cover because they are being covered, and rule number 2 applies. More on that in just a moment. Another rule, a unit cannot have both an AoE physical and an AoE magic cover ability or status simultaneously. The most recently applied cover status will take effect and remove the previous one. The exception to this, only when a cover ability explicitly includes both types of damage can it cover them simultaneously. And that is why units that have an ability known as Omni-Cover, that people call Omni-Cover, are so valuable. And because those abilities specifically cover both physical and magical. And that's what a lot of people are bringing to the current Clash of Wills. Units like Chow, who can cover both physical and magical with his LB, or Esther, who can do that with her LB, are very useful compared to some other units in the game, and we'll talk about some examples as we go. All right, so here are those examples. If you have Runda, I'm going to go ahead and go to my main screen here. If you have Runda in your party, who is a physical cover tank, and Divine Beast Chow, who's a magical cover tank, and they both use their cover skills, and the enemy you are fighting happens to do a physical attack, then a magical attack, the physical attack will trigger Runda to cover the party. The party will receive the magical attack because Chow cannot activate his cover since Runda's covering him, right? And that's going to depend on the AI of the boss. If the boss happened to have thrown a magical attack first, Runda wouldn't be able to cover the physical attacks. And so per the rules, once one unit covers, nobody else can cover. You can only have one AoE cover happening at the same time. And so it just kind of depends. And that's what's fun about the current Clash of Wills boss, fun quote unquote, is that, you know, sometimes it's going to throw a magic attack first, sometimes it's going to throw a physical attack first, and you don't know what you're going to get. And so one cover is going to come up before the other. And then your party's going to be weak to the other attacks. And that's why Omni-Cover is really, really valuable. All right, so speaking of Omni-Cover, I'm going to show you two examples. We have Bosch here. Bosch has both physical and magical cover abilities in his kit. So if you use his physical cover skill, for example, Dawn Guard, it is going to put up physical cover for his party. Now, if on the next turn you use Twilight Guard, it's going to remove Dawn Guard and put Twilight Guard in place, and he's going to be covering magic attacks. He can't cover them both at the same time. And that might make the party susceptible to one type of attack or the other, which makes it kind of dangerous unless the boss is like designed around, okay, this turn on even turns I'm going to do physicals, and on odd turns I'm going to do magicals, and you can swap back and forth with Bosch. That's fine. But the current Clash of Wills fight does not have this. The current Clash of Wills fight is spamming AoE physical and magical attacks on you non-stop in random intervals. And random amounts. So you really have to have an Omni-Cover tank to really protect yourself well from those forms of damage. And that's why we're looking at units like Chow, okay, who, if we look at their Festive Fortune, right, it says covers physical, magical, and other for 2 turns. So it specifically says in there that it covers physical, magical, and other, and that's going to supersede his magical cover ability, Guard Dog, or his automatic cover ability, because that only covers magic. And remember, we said the rules say you can only have one form of cover active at a time, and using this will supersede the other. Does that make sense? I hope it does. If you're going to be using this, be careful about what you use on your off turns, basically. All right, but that specifically covers. Esther is another fine example of that. So if you should go to her Brave Shift form, Ball, Lightning Barrier, physical, magical, other. And it covers both, as well as giving her mitigations and re-raise and things like that. And then you could also use her electromagnetic shield, which does the same thing, physical, magical, other, with some damage reduction and things like that. So it does some other good things for her. You want to use both as you need them, but her limit burst helps you with that, staying safe from all kinds of attacks. And so those are the most important things that I wanted to bring up. So again, I'm going to show those rules really quick here. Once cover is triggered, that cover will stay active for the whole turn unless the coverer dies. If they have re-raise, they'll come back, and if they have an auto cover, they will start covering again. If not, they can't cover for the rest of the turn. But at that point, another unit might pop in and jump in their place. But they cannot jump in and do that if they are being covered by somebody else. You can only have one form of cover active at a time. Basically, if you think about it, like, it prevents them from being able to cover because they're already being covered. You can't double that up. There is a funny bug, actually. It's just a visual thing where, like, at the end of your turn, if the enemy counters with a different form of attack, so like they counter that during their turn they did physical attacks, so like Runda jumps out in front, and then at the end of the turn they counter with like magical attacks, Chow will jump out in front. But they're technically not both covering. They're just both standing there because Runda has not moved back into place yet. So that can happen, but that's not truly being covered by both turns or types of cover. Again, you cannot have both physical and magical cover at the same time. You have to use an Omni-Cover if you want to cover both with the same unit. So Esther, Chow, Jekt, somebody who has an ability that says specifically it does all 3 of them. What's her name? Lilith has an ability that allows her to do this on a very limited basis, which is pretty cool. So yeah, use somebody who has an Omni-Cover ability if you want to cover both physical and magical attacks. Now, the other question that came up that also had to do with tanks, had specifically to do with the new tank, Silent Knight Charlotte, and that is, guys, can Silent Knight Charlotte do the job like Chow if I don't have one, or is this just a bad unit? And so I don't have an example of Charlotte to show you. I'm gonna go ahead and put Chow here, and we're gonna talk a little bit about some examples of some of their utility skills and things like that to try and address this question. And then I'll let you decide for yourself if you think that based on what you see here, can say Silent Knight Charlotte do the job like Chow. So here we go. I'm going to cover a few basic things in their kit. Here is Chow's basic cover skill, Guard Dog. And here's what it does. I'm going to pop it up on the screen. But it gives Chow a chance to protect all allies from magic damage for at a 100% rate, with mitigations between 70 and 85% for Chow, which means he takes 70 to 85% of the damage when he covers. For 4 turns, it also gives an HP barrier of 5,000 with a morale boost to 250 plus 5% per 100% above, whatever, for 4 turns to all allies. So that's very, very good. In Clash of Wills in particular. But again, the important thing to focus on, 100% chance with 70 to 85% mitigation for the caster. Now here's Charlotte's. Charlotte's does an attack, defense, magic, and spirit buff for 230%, 4 turns to all allies, which is kind of nice. It mitigates damage total 50% for 4 turns to all allies. Okay. It mitigates magic damage taken 50% for 4 turns to all allies. Okay. With a chance to protect all allies from magic damage 100%, with a mitigation rate of 65 to 80% for 4 turns to the caster. So yeah, it is. She is giving the party more mitigations than Chow is with that basic skill, but she does not mitigate as well. Notice the mitigation for the caster for Chow is 70 to 85%, and for her it's 65 to 80%. So pretty much always going to be lower, taking more damage from enemies when she covers a magical attack. So that's one thing to consider. Here's another thing. Chow's good mitigation skill. It is this ability here, Focused Inspiration. It does a 300% buff to all stats for 4 turns to all allies. Cannot be dispelled. It mitigates magic damage taken for 4 turns to all allies. 60%. Cannot be dispelled. Mitigates damage taken for the caster. 80%. Cannot be dispelled. And gives you magic damage down from beasts and fairies for 4 turns to all allies. Cannot be dispelled. And fills the morale gauge for all active units. Awesome. Charlotte's really good mitigation skill is 1 use per battle. So it's automatically not as useful as Chow's, because Chow's can be used multiple times, even though the rotation's bad, and Charlotte's can only be used once. It mitigates magic damage 99% to 1 turn to all allies, which is great. I mean, 99% is way better than 80%, but you can only do this once for 1 turn. And it does all those other things. And notice that Chow's buff is 300%, whereas Charlotte's buff is 230%. And her magic mitigation and damage down is 50%, whereas Chow's for the party is 60%. So it's kind of worth thinking about that. You know, his good mitigation skill, the rotation on it's kind of crummy. It only lasts for 4 turns, and it has a 5-turn cooldown, so there's like a gap in usefulness. You can kind of cheese that a little bit with some other units in your party. But I kind of feel like Chow's winning that one too. So let's take a look then at their utility skills. Chow has a bunch of different things Chow can do. Chow can cure stat breaks with True Guardian's Blessing. He can cure status ailments for the most loyal of hearts. And both of those also give immunity to stat breaks and ailments as well. He can fill morale with those. He can amplify fire and light with Encouraging Light, Encouraging Fire, and Guardian's Holy Flame. Chow can remove imperils, re-raise the party, buff resistances with Courageous Sacrifice, which also kills Chow. Not potentially good, but you can also give him re-raise with his own magic. He can cast Dispelga, Curaja, Libra, and cast Full Life for the whole party to bring everybody back from the brink of death if Chow needs to. And as stated on a previous slide, Chow also gives mitigations versus beasts and fairies, which is kind of neat. And that's not even getting into his shift form. We're gonna get to that in a second. Charlotte has attack and magic breaks, which can potentially be good. I don't want to discourage that, because right now in the current Clash of Wills, having attack and magic breaks only is actually very, very good. She also does some wind damage and buffs your fire and wind resistances for the current Clash of Wills. That's not important at all. She can fill your HP and MP, as well as give you a LB fill rate buff She can cast an AoE re-raise and HP barrier for your party, but that also kills Charlotte, so they both have a skill that kills them. And she gives you some additional mitigations versus insects and dragons on her LB. Her LB also does damage. Her LB also does breaks. And so we're talking about two very different kinds of units in terms of their utility skills. Not to mention that Chow is a brave shift unit, so he can like equip some auto buffs and things like that in the shift form if you're not going to use it, that then transfer over to his base form and allow him for better gearing. But if you want to use him as a damage dealer, technically you can. He can chain with a bunch of different families. He can boost damage versus different races. He can fill LB gauge for the parties. Like he can do lots of stuff with his shift form if you need to use it, as well as being able to like help you gear more flexibly and things like that. So I kind of think Chow here as well. So here's kind of my verdict / opinion on that. While Charlotte can tank, and she can do some different things than Chow does, her mitigations in general are a little lower than Chow's, and thus she does not tank as well as Chow. But her stats can actually get pretty high with all of like, you know, the various gear and things that we have available now. And as a result of that, you might not notice much of a difference in some content in terms of their just raw tanking ability. However, she also has a much more narrow set of support abilities, despite having different options than Chow. And also she lacks specific support for Clash of Wills, which is where Chow was designed and does really well. She does not help you fill morale the same way Chow does. She does not have like a counter move that's going to like totally refill the morale gauge and refill your HP and refill limit bursts and things like that. So she just kind of lacks a lot of the things that Chow does other than tanking. That's really the one thing they have in common, is they tank and they can technically both kill themselves to help the party, which is like kind of a sad way to think about your tank. Why would you do that to our best good boy, you know? So you decide. You let me know based on what you've kind of seen me throw out here. Does she do the job as well as Chow? I kind of think no. The reality though is Chow is time limited and she is not. Still, I think I would rather bring Esther. If I had to make a choice between an Omni-Cover tank like Esther and just like gearing her for spirit, or bringing a unit like Charlotte, I'd probably choose Esther. Or if I really wanted to bring a magic cover tank, I would bring, you know, one that does like better mitigations and things like that. Although really, you know, there's not a whole lot of great always available options, and you're probably gonna end up bringing Runda for mitigations anyway. So take that for what it's worth. If I had Chow though, I'm gonna be bringing Chow. And I do have Chow, and I don't have Charlotte, and I'm not salty about that. I have one and not the other. So hopefully that helps. And you tell me what you think. Did I get it right here? Did I get it wrong? You know, your opinion matters. There you go. So that's pretty much it for right now. Hopefully that helps you get a better understanding of how tanking and covering works, and you know, get a little discussion about, you know, two different tank units and what's good, what's not about them. And yeah, let me know what you think. If you've got a question for next week's video, feel free to let me know in the comments, because if you don't, I'm just going to go scouring through all your comments and questions and coming up with the ones that are probably going to embarrass you if I call you out. So don't be that guy. Just put out a question and ask for some help. That way I can do it without having to, like, you know, embarrass anybody. Not that I've ever done that before in these videos. That's it for right now. So yeah, ask questions, please. It helps. It makes it really fun. And go tank some stuff. Have some fun with it. We'll see you next time.